Thank you very much, and thank you for making Weekend in Sydney tax deductible. I really do actually appreciate that more than you can imagine. By the way, expected behaviour, that's going to happen every now and then, so don't freak out. For almost 2 years, I worked in client services, and for almost 2 decades, and I decided it was time for a change and time to try working in the product field for a bit. So I did what everyone would do. I looked over my boss's list of product clients and decided who it would be fun to work for. So unlike most people, I was actually dumb enough to tell my boss this, and my former boss was good enough to set up a meeting, which is how I find myself working in the product field. So just by show of hands, I'm wondering how many people here work in product? Fair few of you. Okay, keep your hand up if you're working at the next uber cool startup making the next app.net or allo.com. Because I call this the foosball table test. And none of you, or one of you, which is kind of the point, that most of web designers and web developers working in the product field are actually working on quite boring software. And even the campaign monitors and the MailChimps of this world, they're actually making their money from really tedious activities like politicians touching base with their constituents. So we all stand around drinking craft beer, but never talking about working in product, but never mention that the product is boring. And I want to buck the trend. My name is Peter, and I make boring software for a living. The particular brand of boring that I make is called document assembly and contract management software. It's a sort of enterprise-grade, business-to-business software used by large law firms, banks, sort of companies generating similar contracts multiple times a day. So a law firm might use it for generating non-disclosure agreements, a department store might use it for generating supplier contracts, and I'm just a little bit comatose just talking about it. It's not what the cool kids are doing, but it shares an attribute with what the cool kids are doing in that it runs in the web browser. And it does a whole lot of really complicated stuff on the server that I don't actually understand. I don't pretend to understand. Occasionally a back-end developer will try and explain something to me, and I'll nod slowly and back away. But that's okay, I'll get excited about object-oriented CSS or explain the relative merits of various CSS naming conventions, and they'll nod slowly and back away. But 2 years ago, back in my old client services role, they came on board as a client, and we helped modernised it. It was more dated than what you see. It had sort of fixed width, table-based layouts, crazy long selected roles, and so back in my old client services role, as I said, we helped tidy it up a bit. But as you can see behind me, it was not made responsive. We made it over, but we didn't give it, we didn't birth it again. So to this day, the entire thing remains about as responsive as a spoon. But that's okay. It's not really a disadvantage for an enterprise app not to be responsive, because enterprise apps are used by staff in a cubicle at their desk. And the more conservative the application, the truer this is. For my software used in large multinational corporations, staff are likely to be using IE8 running on Windows XP. Of course, we all know that this is bullshit. Hands up if you wanted to slap me a little bit when I was just in that last little section. Keep your hands up if you've heard the argument at work. You are my favourite audience. And the reason we know that it's not true is because we work with people, and people take iPads to meetings. And we've also, anyone who catches public transport to work will have sat next to someone doing paperwork for the morning. Usually a lawyer marking up something like an NDA. You know, you look over hoping it's a juice of defence brief, but no, it's not. But we've all done it. We've all started playing a game on our phone and then just switched over to check one email, and before you know it, the inner workaholic has escaped. So knowing people use handheld devices for business apps is really important if you're telling your boss that you want to take your business app responsive. But you've got to know it in the right language, and that's actually the language of business case. Because you've got to convince your boss with exciting things like use cases, cost benefit, return on investment. I sort of went with the poster child for my use case. I went with Barry the mobile banker. Barry's found that he gets more conversions when he generates the paperwork on site. And the bank wants to start sending around their mobile bankers with nothing more than iPads. They've decided that potential customers are more comfortable with an iPad, but mainly it'll save the bank a couple of $100,000 a year. So that was my sort of basic poster child use case. And that's what I kept on telling my boss. But I've worked with other developers and designers who'll flinch at the idea of working on a business case. Because I'm an artist, I do what feels right, and use cases and ROI cripple creativity. Which is bad luck. Because when it's your money, you get to ignore the return on investment. And in most cases, design and development are actually just a means to an end. And that end goal is to make money. If you work on brochure sites, you work in advertising. If you make a free app, you work in advertising. In my case, I work on a reasonably expensive enterprise-grade app. Anything I do has to give my company a competitive advantage. So essentially, I work in sales. And when you understand the commercial impact of your work, you find yourself with two choices. You can either maintain you're an artist, or you can actually just embrace it and make a business case. And only one of those is going to get you the result you're after, the business case. So start, if you're trying to convince someone to take an app responsive, start with a Scratch document, just a basic list of pros and cons. And I don't think it needs to be anything more than bullet points. You're just writing out the Scratch document for your own benefit. The pros you know, because you wouldn't be arguing to go responsive if you didn't already know them. The reason you're writing, the important part of this document is actually the cons, reasons why responsive is a bad idea. And the idea is to keep them to yourselves. And if you like scribbling these things out in a notepad and leaving it on your desk, you might want to start using your desk drawer. You're putting together a list of cons to preempt all the counter-arguments that you might be hearing at work. And depending on how you manage a pitch and the people you work for, you may end up hearing some of these counter-arguments a bit. And also, if you're working on a commercial app, work out the cost benefit. If you think that going responsive is going to increase the number of sales, then it's actually relatively easy to work out how many extra sales you need to make back the cost of the project. So once you have an idea of a return on investment and a basic list of pros and cons, you can start by drafting the document proper to be distributed after your pitch. And it's always important to distribute these things after a pitch. Even sort of boring technical proposal documents, I think they need a pitch first, and you wouldn't present designs without oiling the wheels, so the same applies. So I always just start with an outline and group together the pros and the counter-arguments to the cons that I wrote in my Scratch document, just to bring together some form of narrative. And I also put together a vague story, just something to help humanise the users I'm thinking of as making use of responsive. I don't think you need formal user stories, just in my case a hook, which was Barry the banker. And my before hook was a simple, Barry tries to do this and finds it hard and is frustrated. And then there's the sort of after responsive of, with a touch optimised screen, Barry finds it easier and is now happy. Because Barry can be quite a simple man. He doesn't need to be much more than happy or sad. He doesn't need complex emotions like love or loneliness, because we base our users on 4-year-olds. 4-year-olds that need contract management software, but 4-year-olds nonetheless. And then after you've actually drafted a few sections, that's when it's time to start recruiting some allies within your company. These are the people who are going to help you make your argument stronger. And do that by just sharing your document with colleagues who both agree and disagree with you. And it's important that you share it with people who disagree with you as well. It's no good just having people nodding along saying, yes, I think that was really good, because only a counter-argument will help. A negative feedback will help strengthen your argument. And the feedback you're after are edge cases, process flows and how they may change depending on real estate, edge cases, different feature sets available on different platforms, and I'm talking sort of at a browser and an OS level and how that will influence your design, edge cases, and finally, of course, edge cases. But also, working with sceptical people and getting people to provide pushback has another advantage. Your argument that you're putting forward becomes a collaboration, and the argument you're putting out there becomes their argument as well. It may not mean that they agree with you 100%, but it may mean that they disagree with you less. And after a draft or two, if your direct boss isn't going to be making the decision, then share it up the chain and share it with your direct boss. Again, it's for the same reason. You're trying to recruit these people into your argument. And by this stage, the ideas that you're presenting and writing about will have started to leak throughout the organisation. And the person that you're pitching to will have an inkling of what you're going to say. In my case, when I was going through this process last year, I don't know if it was true, but I'm assuming it is. My boss isn't an idiot. And I think this is great. I really think it's like the first day of spring where you can get away without wearing a jacket. Because rumours build curiosity and acceptance and all these good things. And a big deal will become a much smaller deal once it's leaked first. In the days leading up to the federal budget every year, leaks appear in the media talking about the best and worst of what's to come. And then the Treasurer gives interview after interview, refusing to speculate on rumour and innuendo. The Treasurer is refusing to speculate on rumour and innuendo that he started himself. He started the rumour, so by the time it comes to the pitch, in his case, budget night, the ideas that he's putting out there are already beginning to be accepted. Now, be careful how you interpret that. Don't interpret that the wrong way. I am wanting you to start rumours and innuendo at your work, but the right sort of rumours and innuendo. And then it comes actually time to do the pitch. And I like to produce a pitch deck, which is basically where I just start the same process again. I work on an outline, write out what I want to say, and turn it into slides. I like pitch decks for a number of reasons. The main reason is speaker notes. So tonight you'll notice me and other presenters glancing at our laptops every now and then. We're looking at our presenter notes. These are basically just to tell us what to say. I know some of us do it more subtly than others. I'm aware I am less than subtle. But these notes remind us what it's supposed to be saying and essentially treat us like idiots, or allow us to be humans and lose our spot and recover, hopefully before someone notices. And when it comes time for you to bring the boss on board, they'll allow you to do the same thing. Be prepared and appear prepared even if your mind wanders for a moment. The speaker notes will help you look professional, and they also mean that your slides don't need to be a series of bullet points that you're reading out line by line. And all good pitches actually do need some sort of a demo. And I like to pre-record my demos in QuickTime because I can make typos at the best of time in my code. And if I was live coding now, I'd be leaving the semicolon out of code into an art form. So pre-recording basically guarantees that the demos will work. I chose a fairly simple demo when I was pitching of responsive tables. I started at a desktop and just went down to tablet and then down to iPhone 6 size roughly, just to show the various layout of the tables. Nothing too complicated. I could have chosen a more typical 320 pixels, but I knew that there was a bug that kicked in at around the 350 pixel mark that could actually be relatively easily fixed, but before going in to do the pitch, I didn't have the time to do so. So I could just fudge it and tell a white lie by pre-recording the demo. Obviously, if it's something to blow the budget out with the potential to blow the budget out for months on end, I'm not recommending you fudge that, because that's just going to get you into trouble. But also, pitch decks will give you, and making a formal presentation, actually gives you some control over the pace, and it makes people reluctant to just interrupt you at any point and fire away with the questions. So you get to make your argument and then ask for questions. And as it's work, you can't expect to just railroad the boss and magic away any difficult questions. So it's worth putting in multiple opportunities for questions. But even then, if something comes up that you cover later, you can in effect ask the boss to be patient by just saying, oh, I cover that later, and asking them to hold their horses. And then after you've done the pitch, it's just time for one final update of the document, just to include any of the questions that you were asked during the pitch before you distribute it. Then it looks like you've anticipated the questions, but more often than not, the questions you get asked you probably don't think of as questions. For example, it might be to explain what a CSS preprocessor is, or to explain utility classes in your CSS. But all of this, the pitch decks, the demos, the presenter notes, and the documents, basically to lead to one goal: confidence, because that's what sells. And also, by being confident and treating the internal sales job like an actual sales job, and using the same tools you would for a normal sales, you're sending a clear message to the company. You're saying that I think this is important for the company, and that makes it important for me. And as the expert in the room, this is far more valuable than anything you could write, anything you could include in a pitch deck. And another way of showing how important it is to just start building the thing. You can't actually build the entire thing, because it's easy to skim an hour or two, but skimming months on end to completely do the front end of an application is probably going to be noticed. But in a skimmed hour or two, you can build up a few key patterns and turn those into a few key screens. And by starting building it, it sort of appears fait accompli, and the decision's already been made. And that's a great way of just getting a project that you believe in up. And if you believe that responsive is right for your app, then it's worth a few extra hours work just to get it up. All of this is, of course, much harder than saying responsive just feels right, but these are the arguments that work. We know that because they've worked on us. If on May 25, 2010, a list apart had published Ethan Marcotte's Responsive Just Feels Right Man, the web wouldn't be what it is today. We wouldn't have been convinced. We had to be convinced by a business case. And that's happened time and time again. Zeldman wrote To Hell with Bad Browsers in 2001, and that's helped lead to charts on Can I Use that look like this, and a standards compliant browser landscape. So just as you had to be convinced, you need to convince your boss. And this is a good thing, because you're getting your boss and convincing others to think of the entire browser landscape when they put something in the world. And on your way, you may end up challenging your own ideas and becoming a better web designer or web developer as a result. Thank you very much.